Welcome back. It is time for part 2 of Jack and the Beanstalk. Our learning objectives are to review the elements of fairy tales, identify elements in a fairy tale to determine if your predictions from yesterday were correct, demonstrate an understanding of the words rudely and politely, and then edit your draft of the fairy tale. Our key vocabulary are barked, bellowed, bounding, gulped, and rudely. Barked is a verb, and it means making a loud noise like a dog. The girl barked orders at her little brother. Bellowing is a verb, and it means shouting loudly. We could hear my brother bellowing the lines of his play as he practiced in his room. Bounding is a verb, and it means leaping. Whistling always brought their dog bounding toward them. Gulped is a verb, and it means swallowed something quickly or in large amounts. The soccer players were so thirsty that they gulped down their water. Rudely, it's an adverb, and it means in a way that hurts other people or that is not polite. So this picture shows a boy who is chewing with his mouth open. Ugh, that's rude. Gross. The example that they gave us says he rudely interrupted the teacher while she was speaking. So let's do a little review of the story yesterday. So in this picture, we have the mom, and she's looking in the bucket, and there's no milk. Remember, their cow didn't make any milk. So they needed to sell the cow so that they could have money for food. And Jack was on his way to the market when a man said, "I'll trade you 5 beans for your cow. It's going to grow up into the sky." And Jack said, "Okay." And when he got home, his mama was not happy. So she threw the beans out the window and made him go to bed without dinner. When he woke up, the beans had grown overnight all the way up into the sky. So Jack climbed up it, and when he got up into the sky, he came to a house, and there was a really tall woman. And she said that if you don't leave, my husband's going to eat you because he's a fierce giant. And Jack said, "But please, I'm really hungry." So she let him in to eat some food. But while he was eating his food, he heard thump, thump, thump. And the whole house began to tremble or shake, right? And that's where we left off. Let's go through these pretty quickly. Ready? Fantasy or reality? Reality. Fantasy, because of the fairy. Fantasy, you can't sleep for 100 years. Fantasy, we can't spin straw into gold. Fantasy, if the frog is talking. Reality, if he's not. Reality. Reality. Fantasy, you can't have a gingerbread house. Fantasy, people don't really eat kids. Reality. Reality, you could trade beans for a cow. Fantasy, you cannot climb up a beanstalk. Okay, our vocabulary, we've got barked, bellowing, bounding, gulped, and rudely. I want you to listen carefully to see if your predictions from yesterday about what was going to happen are correct. "Goodness gracious, it's my husband," said the giant's wife. "What on earth shall I do? Quick, jump in here." And Jack jumped into the oven just as the giant came. He was a big one, too, to be sure. He had 3 cows tied to his belt. He threw them down on the table and said rudely to his wife, "Here, wife, cook me a couple of these for breakfast." "But wait, what's this I smell?" "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman." "Now, dear," said his wife, "it's nothing but the leftover smell of that little boy you had for dinner yesterday. Go along and wash up, and by the time you come back, I'll have breakfast ready." So the giant went off, and Jack was about to jump out of the oven when the woman whispered, "Wait till he's asleep. He always takes a nap after breakfast." The giant gulped down his breakfast. Then he went to a giant chest and took out 2 big bags. He sat down, and from the bags he took out piles of gold coins. He began counting them very slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then his head began to nod, and soon he began to snore, so that the whole house shook. Do you know what it means to snore? Can you imagine if it was snoring so loud that the house shook? That'd be crazy. Jack crept out of the oven, tiptoed past the giant, grabbed one of the bags of gold, and ran lickety-split back to the beanstalk. He threw down the bag of gold, which fell kerplunk into his mother's garden, then climbed down until at last he reached the ground. "Well, Mother," he said, "wasn't I right about the beans? They really are magic." For a while, Jack and his mother bought what they needed and a little more with the bag of gold. But at last the bag was empty. So Jack made up his mind to try his luck again at the top of the beanstalk. He climbed and he climbed and he climbed, and once again, sure enough, there was the great tall woman standing on the doorstep of her house. And once again, he asked for something to eat. "Go away, boy," said the woman, "or else my husband will eat you up for breakfast. But say, aren't you the youngster who came here once before? Do you know that on that very day my husband lost one of his bags of gold?" "Did he now?" said Jack. "How very strange! Maybe I could help you find it, but I'm so hungry that first I must have something to eat." So the great tall woman gave him something to eat. But he had hardly taken a bite when thump, 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 they heard the giant's footsteps. Once again, the wife hid Jack in the oven. It all happened as it had before. In came the giant, bellowing, "Fee, fi, fo, fum." Then, after gulping down the 3 broiled oxen for breakfast, the giant said, "Wife, bring me my hen and my golden harp." The wife brought them. The giant looked at the hen and barked, "Lay!" And then the hen laid an egg, all of gold. Then the giant looked at the golden harp and said, "Sing!" And the golden harp sang beautifully. And it went on singing until the giant fell asleep and started snoring like thunder. Jack sneaked out of the oven and crept like a mouse on his hands and knees. Then he crawled up on the table, grabbed the hen and the golden harp, and dashed toward the door. But then the hen began to cluck, and the harp called out, "Master! Master!" The giant woke up just in time to see Jack running away with his treasures. Jack ran as fast as he could, and the giant came bounding after him, and would have caught him, only Jack had a head start. When Jack got to the beanstalk, he climbed down as fast as he could. The giant reached the beanstalk and stopped short. He didn't like the idea of climbing down such a ladder. But, like it or not, the giant swung himself down onto the beanstalk, which shook with his weight. By this time, Jack had climbed down and reached home. "Mother!" he cried. "Give me an axe! Hurry!" His mother came rushing out with an axe in her hand. She ran with Jack to the beanstalk, and then she screamed with fright as she saw the giant making his way down. We're missing a picture. Oh no! I'll have to show it to you. I'll show it to you later. Jack swung the axe and gave a chop at the beanstalk. The giant felt the beanstalk shake, and he stopped to see what was the matter. Jack gave another chop, and another, and another, and the beanstalk began to topple over. Then the giant fell down and broke his crown, and the beanstalk came tumbling after. From then on, Jack and his mother had all the money and music they wanted, for the hen gave them golden eggs, and the harp sang for them all day long, and they lived happily ever after. That is the end. If you need a break, hop up, take a wiggle break, get a snack, go for a quick walk, and then come back, and we will do our comprehension questions and word work. So in our previous lesson, so yesterday, you made a prediction about what you thought was going to happen in this part of the story. Were your predictions correct or not? Okay. So what does the giant's wife tell Jack to do in the beginning of this part of the fairy tale when the rude giant comes into the house to gulp down his breakfast? To hide in the oven, right? And why? Because the giant likes to eat little boys. And what is the treasure that, what was the first treasure that Jack took from the giant? A bag of gold coins. And why does Jack go back up the beanstalk a second time, even after hearing the giant's bellowing voice? He and his mother had spent all of the gold coins. How did the giant's wife treat Jack the second time he went? She gives him some breakfast and helps him hide again when the giant comes. Did she recognize him from before? Yeah. What treasures did Jack take from the giant this time? A hen that lays golden eggs and a harp that sings. What happened when Jack tried to escape with the hen and the harp? The giant woke up and came chasing after him, right? But then Jack chops down the beanstalk with an axe, and the giant falls down and breaks his crown. In the first half of the fairy tale, Jack and his mother had a problem with their cow that had stopped giving milk, and they had no other way to eat. How was that problem solved? They got magic beans that led them to the giant's house, which then allowed Jack to come down with gold. And then what new problem did he encounter in this part of the story? So what were some of the problems that happened in this one? They ran out of their gold, and then the giant came chasing after him again, right? Or not again. The giant came chasing after him. And how was that problem solved? Well, to solve the problem about them running out of gold, he stole the hen that lays golden eggs and the harp. And then what about to solve the problem where the giant is chasing him? He chopped down that beanstalk, right? And the giant fell to the ground. So what parts of the story is fantasy? Climbing a beanstalk, a hen laying golden eggs, a singing harp, a giant. Okay. Do you think that it was right for Jack to steal those things? Why? Interesting thoughts. Okay, so in the read aloud, you heard, he threw them down on the table and said rudely to his wife, "Here, wife, cook me a couple of these for breakfast." Why don't you say the word rudely for me? Rudely. Can you whisper it? Rudely. Can you say it rudely? Rudely. Can you say it in a robot voice? Rudely. To act rudely means you are doing something in a way that hurts others or is not polite. The boys rudely cut to the front of the lunch line. So the opposite of rudely is politely, which means with good manners and respect. In the previous read aloud you heard, "Good morning, ma'am," said Jack politely. I'm going to describe a few situations. If what I'm saying is an example of someone acting rudely, you're going to say, "They are acting rudely." If I give an example of someone acting politely, I want you to say, "They are acting politely." The boys are helping pick up apples that fell out of the bag. They are acting politely. It's polite to help people. The girl was yelling at her brother for spilling his milk. She is acting rudely. That's not very kind. The boy slammed the door shut before his little sister could come into his room. He is acting rudely. The man started talking when someone else was already talking. He is acting rudely. The children remembered to say please and thank you. They are acting politely. Okay, did we review the elements of fairy tales? Did we identify elements in a fairy tale to determine if your predictions were correct? We did. Did we demonstrate an understanding of the words rudely and politely? And then you are going to edit a draft of your narrative retelling of the fairy tale that you chose. I will see you after spring break. Have so much fun. Bye.